father had 2 sons, or so these stories oft go. The elder was clever, but feared much, and would not go abroad in the dark. The younger was deemed stupid, for there was much he didn't seem to understand, including fear itself, for whenever the elder refused to go out at night, or heard a creepy fireside tale, he would say, "Oh, that makes me shudder," and the younger couldn't imagine what he meant by it. The boy imagined it was yet another skill he had failed to grasp, and so he wished he could learn it. As he grew older, his father told him that it was high time he learned a trade or practice of some kind, so that he could earn his way in life. "I should like to learn how to shudder," the boy said, and his father despaired of him. Soon after, the sexton came for a visit, and on hearing the father's woes, offered to take the boy on for work, as he felt he could smooth the youth's rough edges and give him a decent start in life. The father agreed, and the sexton took the youth home to the church with him, where his first duty was to ring the church bell when told. The next night, the sexton woke the youth at midnight and told him to go up and ring the bell in the dark, never mind the hour. As the youth got up and prepared to go out and up the tower, the sexton himself secretly went ahead and draped himself in a sheet, intending to teach the boy a little of fear. So, when the boy reached the top of the tower and took the bell rope, he turned to see a figure draped in white standing on the steps, still and staring. "Who are you?" he asked, but the figure didn't reply. "Answer or leave, you've no business here." The sexton remained silent and motionless, waiting for the boy's nerve to fail at the sight of an obvious ghost. "What do you want?" the boy shouted. "If you're an honest man, speak, or I'll knock you down the stairs." Thinking it a bluff, the sexton stayed still. Surely at any moment, the boy would break and begin to shake in fear, after all. Then the youth shouted once more and rushed to the sexton. Before the man could react, he was tumbling down the church tower stairs until he lay in a heap upon a landing. The boy rang the bell and left the sexton there, locking the church behind himself and going back to bed. Now the sexton had a wife, and in the morning, when she realized he had not returned in the night, she became frightened, and eventually asked the youth if he had seen him, for he had climbed the bell tower before him the previous night. "No," said the youth, "but a thief was standing in the tower and making no answer when I challenged him, so I threw him down the stairs. I'm sorry if I mistook him." She ran to the tower and found the sexton there, moaning over a broken leg. She helped him down the rest of the steps, and, when he was in a place to recover, went to the boy's father with him and reported their misfortune, saying they would have nothing more to do with the youth. At this, the boy's father was alarmed and dismayed, and told his son he could not have him in the house anymore. The boy was glad to leave, however, for he still wished to learn how to shudder, and the brief adventure in the church had taught him nothing of the skill despite the sexton's promises. He left at daybreak with a little food and a bit of money in his pocket, and took away at random, hoping it would bring him what he wished. On the road, he met a fellow traveler, who asked what he was journeying to or for. The youth replied that he wished to learn how to shudder, and the traveler laughed and said that that would be a simple thing. In a while, they would pass a gallows tree, upon which 7 men were hung for murder. The man suggested that if the youth sat beneath it in the night, he would learn to shudder for sure. The youth thought that was quite easy, and said that if he learned to shudder as quickly as that, he would give the man the coins in his pocket. The man said he would return in the morning in that case, but he would not stay the night there, no thank you, and they parted ways at the tree. As evening fell, the boy grew cold, so he made a fire. In the middle of the night, however, the wind grew so strong that even with the fire he was cold, and the hanged men swayed above him, knocking into each other. The youth looked up at them and thought, "I'm cold down here by the fire. Those fellows must be truly freezing." Thinking to be kind, he climbed up the tree and loosed the ropes, lowering them to lay by the fireside. "There," he thought, "that should make them warmer." They lay still, however, and as the fire danced in the wind, the closest one's clothes began to catch alight. "Careful," said the boy, "you're on fire." The man did not move or respond, of course, and the fire began to spread to the clothes of his nearest fellow. "You're all going to catch alight at this rate," the boy warned them. Still, they didn't respond, and the fire spread a bit further. At this point, the boy got up and patted the flames out. "Well, I can see that this will do you more harm than good," he said, and he put them all back up in the tree as they were before. Night passed into morning, and the traveler returned to see how the youth fared, and found him sitting dauntless beside the ashes of his fire. He didn't get his money and went away shaking his head, for he had never met one like the boy before. The youth traveled on alone, still hoping to learn how to shudder. At night, he came to an inn and decided to spend it there. When the innkeeper heard how he wished to learn to shudder, he laughed and said he knew just the thing. There was a haunted castle not far from the inn, an ancestral holding of the king, though he could make no use of it due to the ghosts and devils within. It was said that if someone could keep watch there for 3 nights and live, the castle would be freed, and the king had promised the hand of his daughter in marriage to any who achieved this feat. "Well, that seems easy enough," said the youth, and in the morning he went to the king and made the offer to stay the 3 nights. This pleased the king, and he gave his permission, saying also that any who kept watch could take with them 3 things, though none of those things could be living. "In that case, I'll take a fire for warmth, and a lathe, and a woodcarver's bench to pass the time," said the youth, and these things were granted and taken to the castle during the day, when it was safe enough for his use. That night was the first, and the boy settled himself comfortably by the fire with his carving tools. Before long, he heard wailing from the entrance, and a pair of black cats came in, crying of the cold. "Well then, come and warm yourselves," the boy said, and the cats came near the fire. When they were quite warm, they asked the boy to play cards with them, but he disliked the looks of their claws. "I'll need to trim your nails first," he said, and took them by the backs of the necks and clamped their paws to the workbench. They bit him terribly for this, and so he killed both and threw their bodies in the pond outside the castle. Perhaps they were worse than cats, but the stories don't seem to specify. It only seems that they were part of the haunting, for the tales treat this as the correct course of action, whether they bite or not. After this, a swarm of black cats and dogs, the latter trailing red-hot chains, came surging from all corners, grabbing hold of the boy's fire and trying to tear it apart. He was not frightened, but simply drove them off with a knife and rebuilt his fire for warmth. Now all this excitement was tiring, and so he went looking and found an old bed to sleep upon. As soon as he lay down, however, the bed got up and went galloping about the castle, turning halls and taking stairs. The boy still knew no fear, however, but urged it ever faster until it either gave up and settled, allowing him to sleep upon it, or tipped itself over on top of him, so he was obliged to dig himself out and go sleep on the floor by his fire instead. Thus passed the first night, and when the king came to see if the boy was still alive in the morning, he was surprised to find the youth not only well, but perfectly cheerful, relating the events of the previous night without concern. The boy was fed for the day, and stayed a second night. That night started with a cry from the chimney, and half a man fell down, only the head and arms and chest. "Well, that's not enough for a fellow," the boy said, and at that the second half fell down the chimney as well. The boy dragged the halves out of the fire and reassembled the mess, then turned to find the halves rejoined, and an ugly fellow sitting on his bench. "Now that's my place," the boy protested, and pushed the man away. During this time, more little men fell down the chimney, and along with them came 9 bones and 2 human skulls, which they set up for a game of bowling. The boy watched for a bit, then asked to join. "Have you money to wager?" asked the terrible men. He did, so they allowed him. But first, he asked to turn the skulls, their balls, on the lathe, so that they would be round and roll more truly. He lost a little money while bowling, but had an enjoyable time otherwise, and when midnight struck, the entire company disappeared, bones and all. The boy slept, and in the morning, when the king came to see if he yet lived, he was again perfectly well and cheerful, even though he had still not learned to shudder as he had wished. Nevertheless, he agreed to stay 1 more night and complete the bargain. On the final night, 6 men came bearing a coffin, which the boy immediately assumed must contain a cousin of his who had died but recently. He pried the coffin open, only to find a man freezing cold, not his cousin at all. Still, in concern, he lifted the man out, thinking only to warm the poor fellow by the fire. Holding him and rubbing his limbs for circulation, eventually, the dead man began to stir of his own accord. "How dare you disturb my rest?" said the man. "For that I will kill you." The boy, thinking that very rude and not wanting to die, wrestled him back into the coffin and shut the lid, and let it be carried away again. Still, he had not shuddered once. After the coffin left, a giant arrived, with a beard so long it brushed the ground. This giant made his own threats against the youth's life, to which the youth responded, in short, "No, you won't." Here there are different paths in the tales. In one, the giant offered a challenge of strength, saying the boy would live if he could outdo the giant. They went together to a blacksmith's forge in the castle grounds, where the giant took an axe and drove an anvil into the very ground with a single blow, then challenged the boy to do the same. The boy struck a second anvil and cleft it in half, pinning the giant's beard in the crack. In the other version, the youth simply kept working his lathe, and when the giant came too close, his beard got caught up in the spinning tool, winding round and round until he was caught fast. Either way, the giant was caught by the beard and in the boy's power, and begged for his life, offering great treasures if he was allowed to go free. The boy agreed, and was shown to 3 chests, hidden within the castle, each one full of gold. The giant stipulated that 1 was for the king, 1 for the poor, and 1 for the fearless youth himself. Then, as midnight struck, the giant vanished, and the haunting was broken. The boy divided the chests as ordered, and was taken in by the king and married to his daughter, who liked him well enough, but soon grew tired of his repeated wishes to learn what it was to shudder. I'll give him a shudder, his new young wife thought, and she went out into the castle gardens where a stream ran, and filled a bucket with cold water and little minnows. Then in the morning she threw this bucket, fish and all, across her sleeping husband, so that he woke with a start and a shudder as the fish wiggled all over him. Thus, he learned to shudder, and lived well and happily all his life.